Good evening from the Tibet Center. Kunkyap Tarderling. Tonight we will continue reading Beyond Religion, Ethics for a Whole World by His Holiness the Dalai Lama. There are books in there. Okay. But we'll start with the recitation of the prayer for the spreading of the teachings throughout the length and breadth of the West, which you'll find below. So, by the force of the blessings of the non-fallacious three precious gems, and of the truth of our pure selfless wishes, may the precious Buddhist teachings flourish and spread to the expanse of all areas throughout the length and breadth of the West. For all the people living there together with their near ones, who have engaged in the teachings and have faith and respect for them, may all conditions adverse to their practice of the pure Dharma be dispelled, and an excellent collection of favorable conditions increase like the waxing moon. And especially for those who work on methods to accomplish the flourishing and spreading of the victorious one's teachings, which are the source of benefit and happiness, may they never be oppressed by masses of interference and adverse conditions, and may this spontaneously happen just as we hope and wish. Now the Heart Sutra. Thus have I heard once. The Blessed One was dwelling in the royal domain of the Vulture Peak Mountain, together with a big gathering of great monks and great bodhisattvas. At that time, the Blessed One entered the Samadhi, which examines the Dharmas, called profound illumination. And at the same time, noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, looking at the profound practice of transcendent knowledge, saw the five skandhas in their natural emptiness. Then, through the inspiration of the Buddha, Venerable Shariputra said to Avalokiteshvara, "How should those noble ones learn who wish to follow the profound practice of transcendent knowledge?" And Avalokiteshvara answered, "Venerable Shariputra, whoever wishes to follow the profound practice of transcendent knowledge should look at it like this, seeing the five skandhas in their natural emptiness. Form is empty, emptiness itself is form. Emptiness is not separate from form, form is not separate from emptiness. In the same way, feeling, discriminating awareness, compositional factors, and consciousness are empty. Thus all the dharmas are empty and have no characteristics. They are unborn and unceasing. They are not impure or pure. They neither decrease nor increase. Therefore, since there is emptiness, there is no form, no feeling, no discriminating awareness, no compositional factors, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no appearance, no sound, no smell, no taste, no sensation, no objects of mind, no quality of sight, no quality of hearing, no quality of smelling, no quality of tasting, no quality of sensing, no quality of thought, no quality of mind consciousness. There is no nidanas from ignorance to old age and death, nor their wearing out. There is no suffering, no cause of suffering, no ending of suffering, and no path, no wisdom, no attainment, no non-attainment. Therefore, since there is no attainment, the bodhisattvas abide by means of transcendent knowledge. And since there is no obscurity of mind, they have no fear. They transcend falsity and pass beyond the bounds of sorrow. All the Buddhas who dwell in the past, present, and future by means of transcendent knowledge fully and clearly awaken to unsurpassed, true, complete enlightenment. Therefore, the mantra of transcendent knowledge, the mantra of deep insight, the unsurpassed mantra, the unequaled mantra, the mantra which calms all suffering should be known as truth, where there is no deception. In transcendent knowledge, the mantra is proclaimed. Tadyata Om Gate Gate Paragate Parasamgate Bodhisvaha. O Shariputra, this is how a bodhisattva mahasattva should learn profound transcendent knowledge. Then the Blessed One arose from that samadhi and praised the bodhisattva mahasattva Avalokiteshvara, saying, Good, good, O son of noble family, profound, transcendent knowledge should be practiced just as you have taught, and the Tathagatas will rejoice. When the Blessed One had said this, Shariputra and Avalokiteshvara, that whole gathering and the world with its gods, humans, asuras, Gandharvas, their hearts full of joy, praised the words of the Blessed One. And now to generate bodhicitta. With the wish to free all beings, I shall always go for refuge to the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha until I reach full enlightenment. Inspired by wisdom and compassion, today in the Buddha's presence, I generate the mind intent on full awakening for the benefit of all sentient beings. As long as space endures, as long as sentient beings remain, until then may I too remain to dispel the miseries of the world. With the wish to free all beings, I shall always go for refuge to the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha until I reach full enlightenment. Inspired by wisdom and compassion, today in the Buddha's presence, I generate the mind intent on full awakening for the benefit of all sentient beings. As long as space endures, as long as sentient beings remain, until then may I too remain to dispel the miseries of the world. With the wish to free all beings, I shall always go for refuge to the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha until I reach full enlightenment. Inspired by wisdom and compassion, today in the Buddha's presence, I generate the mind intent on full awakening for the benefit of all sentient beings. As long as space endures, as long as sentient beings remain, until then may I too remain to dispel the miseries of the world. So, we have been discussing His Holiness's Beyond Religion, and last night we reached page 18. And to recap, let me go back one paragraph. More fundamental than religion, therefore, is our basic human spirituality. We have an underlying human disposition towards love, kindness, and affection, irrespective of whether we have a religious framework or not. When we nurture this most fundamental human resource, when we set about cultivating those inner values which we all appreciate in others, then we start to live spiritually. The challenge, therefore, is to find a way of grounding ethics and supporting the cultivation of inner values that is in keeping with the scientific age, while not neglecting the deeper needs of the human spirit, which for many people, religion answers. So I'd like to begin by saying, please feel free to ask questions online, and we have both on YouTube and on Facebook. You can write your questions in and participate in this discussion. So what's interesting about what I just read is that His Holiness is defining a spiritual path, a spiritual practice. When we nurture this most fundamental human resource, when we set about cultivating those inner values which we all appreciate in others, then we start to live spiritually. So it has nothing to do with a belief in God or the negation of a creator being. It has to do with living in a way that that is working towards cultivating those inner values which we appreciate in others. So, grounding ethics in human nature. That's the next section. Across all cultures, all philosophies, and indeed all individual perspectives, there is no consensus about the essential orientation of human nature. Instead, there seem to be many views. To put the matter at its simplest, there are some who believe at one end of the spectrum that we are by nature fundamentally violent, aggressive, and competitive, while others at the other end take the view that we are predominantly disposed towards gentleness and love. Most perspectives lie between these two extremes, accommodating all of our qualities and propensities in varying degrees. Generally speaking, if we view human nature as dominated by destructive tendencies, our ethics will most likely be grounded in something outside ourselves. We will understand ethics as a means for keeping those destructive tendencies in check in the name of some greater good. If, however, we view nature as predominantly oriented towards kindness and the desire for a peaceful life, then we can consider ethics an entirely natural and rational means for pursuing our innate potential. On this understanding, ethics consists less of rules to be obeyed than of principles for inner self-regulation to promote those aspects of our nature which we recognize as conducive to our own well-being and that of others. This second approach is in tune with my own. So, no, I don't see any questions. I just see good evening. So that's what I found interesting here is His Holiness's definition of a structure of ethics that is responding to a belief in a generally destructive frame of mind. Generally speaking, if we view human nature as dominated by destructive tendencies, our ethics will most likely be grounded in something outside ourselves. We will understand ethics as a means for keeping those destructive tendencies in check in the name of some greater good. So, the two pillars for secular ethics. I believe that an inclusive approach to secular ethics, one with the potential to be universally accepted, requires recognition of only two basic principles. Both of these can easily be grasped on the basis of our common experience as humans and our common sense, and both are supported by findings of contemporary research, particularly in the fields of psychology, neuroscience, and the clinical sciences. The first principle is the recognition of our shared humanity and our shared aspiration to be happy and the avoidance of suffering. The second is the understanding of interdependence as a key feature of human reality, including our biological reality as social animals. Now, what's interesting about these two, the first principle being the recognition of our shared humanity, and the second being an understanding of interdependence, is that in the meditations that we are to cultivate to bring about compassion, we have to recognize our shared humanity, and we also have to recognize our position of our interdependence, the way in which we are dependent on others for all our happiness. Um, those thoughts bring about a sense of caring for others, a sense of responsibility towards others. In order to have that sense of responsibility, we have to recognize that they share our suffering, they share our difficulties, they share our challenges, and we have to recognize that we're dependent on them.
Suppresses our arrogance.
From these two principles, we can learn to appreciate the inextricable connection between our own well-being and that of others, and we can develop a genuine concern for others' welfare. Good evening. It's very crowded here tonight, but there's a place you can sit right here. There, he has books if you want a book. So we're on page 19. So we're talking about two principles that bring about that form the foundation for ethics, ethical behavior. The first is the recognition of our shared humanity and our shared aspiration to happiness and the avoidance of suffering. The second is the understanding of interdependence as a key feature of human reality, including our biological reality as social animals. From those two principles, we can learn to appreciate the inextricable connection between our own well-being and that of others, and we can develop a genuine concern for others' welfare. So that here, it's interesting that the result of those is what we can call compassion. We can develop a genuine concern for others' welfare. And I think the concern here can be extended to that wish to remove the suffering of others. Together, I believe, they constitute an adequate basis for establishing ethical awareness and the cultivation of inner values. It is through such values that we gain a sense of connection with others, and it is by moving beyond narrow self-interest that we find meaning, purpose, and satisfaction in life. Before offering a systematic presentation of the way I envisage this secular approach, a few words are in order on the background and motivation that shape my views on this subject. Since childhood, I've been a Buddhist monk in the Tibetan Mahayana tradition. My understanding of ethics, as well as of issues such as human nature and the pursuit of happiness, is informed by this background. On a personal level, my everyday approach to the practice of ethics is profoundly influenced by the writings of the Indian Nalanda tradition, which combines critical philosophical inquiry with ethical living and contemplative practice. In the course of this book, I draw on some of the resources of the Nalanda tradition. However, it is certainly not my intention in presenting this book to make more Buddhists. In fact, when I'm asked to to give Buddhist teachings in the West, I often share my personal view that it is not, by and large, a good idea for people to adopt religious practices which are not well grounded in their own cultural and educational background. To do so would be difficult and can lead to unnecessary confusion. Instead, my motivation is simply a wish to contribute to the betterment of humanity. If resources from my tradition can be useful to those outside it, then I think it is good to draw on those resources. In writing this book, I'm certainly not interested in propagating my own faith. Instead, I'm calling on my readers to investigate matters for themselves. If they find something of insight, if they find some of the insights of classical Indian thought useful in their investigations, that is excellent. But if not, that is also okay. So, in the following chapters, I offer my thoughts not as a Buddhist, nor as a religious believer, but simply as one human being among nearly 7 billion others, one who cares about the fate of humanity and wants to do something to safeguard and improve its future. So, we are, anytime you want to contribute, say something, ask a question, please feel free. Let's see if you have a question. Okay. Our common humanity. How we see ourselves. As a matter of observation, how people treat their fellow human beings, and indeed the world around them, largely depends on how they conceive of themselves. We all have many different ways of seeing who we are, and these different views influence our behavior. For instance, we may consider ourselves in terms of gender as men or women, or as followers of this or that religion, or as members of this or that race or nationality. We may think of ourselves in terms of family, as a father or a mother, for instance. We may also identify with our occupation, our level of education, our achievements. Depending on which perspective we take, we raise different expectations of ourselves, and this in turn affects our behavior, including our treatment of other people. Everyone has his or her own separate identity. Because of this, it is of primary importance in any attempt to develop a genuinely universal approach to ethics to have a clear understanding that of what unites us all, namely our common humanity. We are all human, all 7 billion of us. In this respect, we are all 100% the same. To begin, then, let us consider what it is that actually makes us human. Well, first of all, it is our simple physical reality, this body of ours, made up of so many parts, bones, muscles, blood, so many molecules, atoms, and so on. At the basic material level, there is no qualitative difference between the matter that makes up a human being and, for example, the matter that makes up a lump of rock. In terms of material constitution, a lump of rock and our human bodies are both ultimately made up of aggregations of minute particles. Modern science suggests that all matter of the cosmos is being endlessly recycled. Many scientists even hold the view that the very atoms in our bodies once belonged to stars far away in time and space. Yet, It is clearly the case that a human being belongs to quite a different category of things from a lump of rock. We are born, we grow, and then we die, as do plants and other animals. However, unlike plants, we also have conscious experience. We feel pain and we experience pleasure. We are sentient beings, what in Tibetan we call semden. During one of my many discussions with my late friend, the neurobiologist Francisco Varela, we talked about what it is that distinguishes sentient forms of life from plant forms of life. As I recall, he suggested as a criterion an entity's ability to move itself from here to there, or words to that effect. If an organism can move its whole body from one place to another to escape danger and survive, or to obtain food and to reproduce, then it may be regarded as a sentient being. This definition interested me since it implies that even from a scientific point of view, what defines such a living being as something to do with the ability to feel pleasure and pain and to respond to these feelings even if the responses are predominantly or even entirely instinctive. I'm going to read that over. This definition interested me since it implies that even from a scientific point of view, what defines such a living being as something to as has something to do with the ability to feel pleasure and pain and to respond to these feelings, even if the responses are predominantly or even entirely instinctive. At the most basic level, the ability to respond to one's surroundings with conscious experience is what we can consider, in the broadest sense, mind. And so, possessing mind. This is not the place to embark on a lengthy treatment of the vast issue of what constitutes mind and the ways in which the human mind is distinguished from that of other uh, beings. So a few words will have to suffice. The primary ingredients of human experience, according to modern science, are the data of our senses: sight, sound, touch, taste, and smell. At another level of perception are our subjective experiences of these basic sensations, whether we experience them as pleasure, pleasant, unpleasant, neutral, or some combination of these. As far as we know, we share this kind of apprehension of sensory experience as pleasurable or painful with other animals. Birds and mammals, for example, seem to apprehend sensory experience in a manner very similar to ours. While other types of animals, such as fish or insects, seem to differ from us considerably in this respect. However wide and varied the spectrum of sentience may be across different kinds of animals, it is apparent that all beings which have conscious experience, are oriented towards the pursuit of those experiences which are pleasant and the avoidance of those which are unpleasant or painful. So here, the basis for or creating equanimity, the basis for then engaging in the practices for cultivating compassion and responsibility towards others is recognizing just this. All beings which have conscious experience are oriented towards the pursuit of those experiences which are pleasant and avoidance of those which are unpleasant or painful. No, but we are working towards recognizing that others share that same wish for happiness and the avoidance of suffering. In this fundamental respect, we humans are no different from other animals. Like them, we seek to avoid suffering and are naturally drawn towards experiences that are pleasant or happy. But if this fundamental orientation is a defining feature of sentient beings in general, humans constitute a rather special category. Clearly, there's more to being humans than merely responding to sensory experience. We are not like dogs or cats, for instance, which by and large respond to their experiences purely on instinct. We humans have evolved over many thousands of years at a tremendous complexity which distinguishes us from all other animals. This difference is reflected in the large size of our brains, which have a much more developed frontal cortex than the brains of other species. Human consciousness and empathy. In discussing the complexity of the human mind, I'm not just thinking of our intellectual or rational processes and our ability for self reflection, but rather of the entire range of our conscious experience, which includes not just thoughts, imagination, and memory, but also feelings and emotions. In fact, when I talk about mind or experience in this rather general way, I'm usually thinking of the Tibetan word sem, mind, and shipa, cognition, both of which refer not just to the predominantly intellectual activities normally associated with words such as mind and mental in English and other languages, but rather to all areas of our inner experience, including feelings and emotions, which in those languages are often described as matters of the heart. So I'm getting a message from Shruti Joshi. Good evening, Venerable Nikki. His Holiness's view is unique. People should remain grounded in the faith tradition, matching their cultural and educational background. Could you please discuss this more? How does one maintain one's religious identity and adopt Buddhist ethics as a way to live? So I don't think that we should think of what we are hearing as Buddhist ethics. I think we should consider them to be secular ethics. And I don't think that, I think that what is being laid out is the basis for ethical behavior to really be something that we can see as a natural quality to be cultivated out of recognition that others wish for happiness in the same way we do. Others wish to avoid suffering in the same way we do. And we should therefore behave in the same way that they would wish us to behave, in the same way, in the way that we would like to be treated and the way that they would like to be treated. So I don't think I don't think we should think of this as Buddhist ethics. Ethics are sort of rules that guide our behavior so that we navigate life in a way that promotes happiness and avoids suffering for ourselves or for those we are interacting with, can be seen as something that demands uh, uh, a ruler who is imposing these rules on us to enable us to navigate life, while if we take this more, let's say, organic approach, we can actually assume the responsibility for recognizing the validity of ethical behavior as being natural, as being the way to behave in order to avoid suffering for ourselves and for those around us. Um, so, um,
So you might answer the question. First of all, I don't believe that any one religion owns the concept of ethical behavior, but you might respond by explaining if there is or is not any difference when a Buddhist contemplates ethics versus another religion contemplates ethics. I personally don't think that there would be a difference, but if there was, maybe you could share it.
the difference that His Holiness presents of the way one contemplates ethics is that in one case, one is doing so thinking of oneself as having basically naturally negative tendencies that have to be curbed by rules.
But that's the human behavior, the ethics themselves, the understanding of ethical behavior as a goal or as where you are is going to be the same, right? What you're saying is that some people are born, like people would say they're born in sin and then they have to correct. And then you're saying that the Dalai Lama says that you're born already understanding and already good with ethics.
Well, what His Holiness is presenting is something that he feels really becomes valid whether we believe ourselves to be born in sin or with sinful tendencies that we have to curb by means of rules and regulations, or whether we engage in life with with let's say more virtuous or positive tendencies, which then form the basis for our ethical behavior, wishing to engage in ways that make those around us happy and make us behave in a way that does so. How does one maintain one's religious identity? So I don't think that one has to give up one's religious identity, whether one is a Christian, whether one is a Jew, whether one is a Muslim, whether one is a Hindu, whether one is a Buddhist, whether one is a Sikh, whether one is a Zoroastrian, whether one is the I think that one's religious identity, one's religious practice should have as its aim our becoming a better person, and so. And what is a better person? A better person is someone who is kinder, less angry, and more devoted to others, less selfish. And in that light, this secular ethics, which can be applied by people of any religion as well as people with no religious feelings at all, is this ethical system where one is simply working towards serving and refraining from acting in ways that others would resent, uh, becomes valid. And no
On the
matter who.
subjective side, you're more happy. You could sell it that way, I guess.
So I hope that answers this question.
Very nicely said.
Okay, so now there are more questions. Good evening.
People walk up.
Okay. So where did we get to? Human consciousness and empathy? In discussing the complexity of the human mind, I am not just thinking of our intellectual, rational processes and our ability for self-reflection, but rather of the entire range of our conscious experience, which includes not just thoughts, imagination, and memory, but also feelings and emotions. In fact, when I talk about mind or experience, in this rather general way, I'm usually thinking of the Tibetan word sem and words sem and shepa, both of which refer not just to the predominantly intellectual activities normally associated with words such as mind and mental in English and other Western languages, but rather to all areas of our inner experience, including feelings and emotions, which in those languages are often described as matters of the heart. Some time ago, Western scientists began to conduct neuroscientific tests on long-term Tibetan meditators to measure the biological effects of their contemplative practices. On one occasion, I was told the scientists were giving a talk on their experiment to a group of monks at the Namgyal Monastery here in Dharamsala. To demonstrate their techniques, one of the scientists wore on his head a white cap, from which protruded a great mass of wires and electrodes. On seeing him, some of the monks burst out laughing. The scientists assumed they were laughing at the strange sight of a Western scientist with wires attached to his head. But it turned out they were also laughing in surprise that the wires were only attached to the head and not to any other areas of the body. After all, if the intention was to measure qualities such as compassion or loving kindness, wouldn't other parts of the body, such as the heart, be equally important? These days, we're better versed in the contemporary scientific models and are no longer so surprised by the centrality that modern science accords to the brain. And the scientists, too, have changed their methods somewhat. They now include measurements to detect changes in the heart. As to what distinguishes the human mind from the minds of other beings, a few major features are immediately apparent. We humans have a strong and subtle capacity for remembering, seemingly much greater than those of many other animals, which allows us to project our thoughts into the past. We also have the ability to project our thoughts into the future. In addition, we have very powerful imaginations and a highly developed capacity for communication through symbolic language. And perhaps most distinctively, we have the capacity for rational thought, the ability to critically evaluate and compare different outcomes in both real and imaginary situations. While other animals may possess some of these qualities to a limited degree, They do not match the humans in their level of sophistication. Along with these characteristics, we have a further quality which is central to our identity as human beings, our instinctive capacity for empathy. Of course, we're not alone in this. Some other animals exhibit behaviors that seems to indicate empathy. Nonetheless, it is essential, it is an essential human trait. When we see someone in pain, even a stranger on the street or a victim of natural disaster we see on television or hear about on the radio, we have an instinctive response to his or her suffering. And not only that, we also experience an instinctive urge, whether we act upon it or not, to do something about it, to help that stranger on the street, or to ease the suffering of those we see on television. In the same way, when we witness people triumphing over adversity, our instinctive ability to empathize with the experience of others allows us to share their joy. I think part of the reason so many of us love to watch films, sports, and plays, to read entertaining books, and so on, is that in addition to the thrills they bring, they also give us the chance to feel others' joys and sorrows as if they were our own. We naturally enjoy empathetic experience and often seek it out in our lives. An example is the joy we take in the delight of small children. We love to see their faces light up when we smile at them, give them something, or tell them a story. In the same way, we naturally enjoy the happiness of our loved ones. Everyone prefers to see others smiling rather than frowning. Since we're social animals, that is, since our survival and flourishing depends on being part of a group or community, our capacity for empathy has profound implications for our pursuit of happiness and well being. Happiness and suffering. That we all seek a happy life is, I think, a claim which needs no justification. No one wishes for difficulties or trouble. This is something that the very constitution of our bodies confirms. Medical science increasingly suggests that a person who is happy and peaceful, free from fear and anxiety, will enjoy tangible health benefits. It is also a matter of common sense that even people afflicted by illness are much better off if they have a positive outlook. So I consider it a simple truth that this body of ours is meant for a happy life. A happy mind is a healthy mind, and a healthy mind is good for the body. But human happiness and suffering, unlike those of other animals, are not straightforward. A dog may find happiness by eating a good meal and then going onto the veranda to lie down. While we may relate to such simple pleasures, it is clear that they are in no way sufficient for genuine human satisfaction. The never-ending human quest for happiness and avoidance of suffering explains not only humankind's greatest achievements, but also the evolution over many millennia of this large brain of ours. Even the very concept of religion, I think, has arisen from this quest. For in the course of life, we inevitably face problems that are beyond our ability to control. To maintain hope and to keep our spirits up, therefore, we develop faith. And to support faith, we turn to prayer, and prayer is a core element of religion. Similarly, I would suggest The extraordinary human achievements in science and technological innovation over the past few centuries also stem from the urge to overcome suffering and achieve happiness. However, although our extraordinary mental sophistication distinguishes us humans from other forms of life and drives our astonishing success as a species, this very mental complexity is, at the same time, the source of many of our most enduring difficulties and hardships. Most of the problems we face in the world today, such as armed conflict, poverty, injustice, and environmental degradation, have arisen and are maintained by complex human activity. Furthermore, our most persistent sources of inner suffering at an individual level, fear, anxiety, and stress, for example, are also closely connected to our mental complexity and our excitable imaginations. Fundamental equality. In our quest for happiness and the avoidance of suffering, we are all fundamentally the same and therefore equal. This is an important point. So in our quest for happiness and avoidance of suffering, we are all fundamentally the same. We all wish for happiness and we all wish to avoid suffering, and we are thereby equal. This is an important point. This serves as the basis for developing the heart. For if we can integrate an appreciation of this fundamental human equality into our every outlook, I am very confident that it will be of immense benefit, not only to society at large, but also to us as individuals. For myself, whenever I meet people, whether they are presidents or beggars, whether dark or fair, short or tall, rich or poor, from this nation or that, of this faith or that, I try to relate to them simply as human beings who, like me, seek happiness and wish to avoid suffering. Adopting this perspective, I find, generates a natural feeling of closeness, even with those who, until that moment, were complete strangers to me. Despite all our individual characteristics, no matter what education we may have or what social rank we may have inherited, and irrespective of what we may have achieved in our lives, we all seek to find happiness and to avoid suffering during this short life of ours. For this reason, I often make the point that the factors which divide us are actually much more superficial than those we share. Despite all the characteristics that differentiate us, race, language, religion, gender, wealth, and many others, we are all equal in terms of our basic humanity. And this equality is corroborated by science. The sequencing of the human genome, for example, has shown that artificial differences constitute only a tiny fraction of our genetic makeup, the vast majority of which is shared by all of us. In fact, at the genome level, the differences between individuals appear more pronounced than those between different races. In light of these considerations, the time has come, I believe, for each of us to start thinking and acting on the basis of an identity rooted in the phrase, we human beings. Well, that may be the place to stop. And Darren, is there anything that's come up on the, let me see. In my work as a frontline healthcare professional, the idea of shared humanity and compassion based on equality comes up often. We can be compassionate when we see others, even those who are suffering. Are more similar to us than different. Yes. Well said. Thank you.
So, one named for Governor Gnome's puppy. Cricket.
Yeah.
His name was Cricket. Right.
The lady that shot the dog didn't want to be worried about it. It's something to be proud of.
So let us, if you want to, if you have anything you want to say.
No.
So we shall read. Where is it? The Sutra of the Recollection of the Noble Three Jewels, and we've been asked to pray for cricket. I prostrate to the Omniscient One. Thus the Buddha, Bhagavat, Tathagata, Arhat, Samyak Sambuddha, the learned and virtuous one, the Sugata, the knower of the world, the charioteer and tamer of beings, the unsurpassable one, the teacher of devas and humans, is the Buddha Bhagavat. The Tathagata is in accord with all merit. He does not waste the roots of virtue. He is completely ornamented with all patience. He is the basis of the treasures of merit. He is adorned with the minor marks. He blossoms with the flowers of the major marks. His activity is timely and appropriate. Seeing him is without disharmony. He brings true joy to those who long with faith. His knowledge cannot be overpowered. His strength cannot be challenged. He is the teacher of all sentient beings. He is the father of bodhisattvas. He is the king of noble ones. He is the guide of those who journey to the city of nirvana. He possesses immeasurable wisdom. He possesses inconceivable confidence. His speech is completely pure. His melody is pleasing. One never has enough of seeing him. His form is incomparable. He is not stained by the realm of desire. He is not stained by the realm of form. He is not affected by the formless realm. He is completely liberated from suffering. He is completely and utterly liberated from the skandhas. He is not possessed with dhatus. His ayatanas are controlled. He has completely cut the knots. He is completely liberated from torment. He is liberated from craving. He has crossed over the river. He is perfected in all the wisdoms. He abides in the wisdom of the Buddha Bhagavats who arise in the past, present, and future. He does not abide in nirvana. He abides in the ultimate perfection. He dwells on the bhumi where he sees all sentient beings. All these are the perfect virtues of the greatness of the Buddha Bhagavat. The holy Dharma is good at the beginning, good in the middle, and good at the end. Its meaning is excellent, its words are excellent, it is uncorrupted, it is completely perfect and completely pure. It completely purifies. The Bhagavat teaches the Dharma well. It brings complete vision. It is free from sickness. It is also always timely. It directs one further. Seeing it fulfills one's purpose. It brings discriminating insight for the wise. The Dharma, which is taught by the Bhagavat, is revealed properly in the Vinaya. It is renunciation. It causes one to arrive at perfect enlightenment. It is without contradiction. It is pithy, it is trustworthy, and puts an end to the journey. As for the Sangha of the great Yana, they enter completely, they enter insightfully, they enter straightforwardly, they enter harmoniously. They are worthy of veneration with joined palms. They are worthy of receiving prostration. They are a field of glorious merit. They are completely capable of receiving all gifts. They are an object of generosity. They are a great object of complete generosity. The protector who possesses great kindness, the omniscient teacher, the basis of oceans of merit and virtue, I prostrate to the Tathagata. pure, the cause of freedom from passion, virtuous, liberating from the lower realms. This alone is the supreme ultimate truth. I prostrate to the Dharma, which is peace. Having been liberated, they show the path of liberation. They are fully dedicated to the disciplines. They are a holy field of merit and possess virtue. I prostrate to the Sangha. I prostrate to the Buddha, the leader. I prostrate to the Dharma, the protector. I prostrate to the Sangha, the community. I prostrate respectfully and always to these three. The Buddha's virtues are inconceivable. The Dharma's virtues are inconceivable. The Sangha's virtues are inconceivable. Having faith in these inconceivables, therefore, their fruitions are inconceivable. Maybe they be born in a completely pure realm. So let us read the prayer for a swift return. Exalted wisdom of all victors gathered in a drop, sole refuge manifest in the form of the one wearing saffron robes, Guru Losang Tuwang Dorje Chang, please bear witness here today that our prayers may be fulfilled. We beseech the great torch of doctrine, accomplishing for long ago the vast ways of aspirational prayers. Lord of speech of the victor Losang's teachings, spreading them to the ends of the earth by means of explanation and practice. Though holding the commitment, I will invite all beings to be my guests in unsurpassed great awakening, yet you have withdrawn the activity of the form body that serves the welfare of others. Is that worthy of the supreme among beings, the Bodhisattvas? Though impossible for you till cyclic existence end to abandon your commitment to liberate all beings, we beseech the new son of Nirmanakaya to swiftly return to the realm of Dharmakaya, brought forth by Bodhicitta, drawn by seven steeds. Having reached the far limits of scholarship, religious life, and goodness, please come swiftly as an supreme emanation, full holder of the sage's teachings, and wish-fulfilling jewel, return as the glory of Losang Tempe. Magnificent truth, the three principles, the precious jewels, Mahakala, Karmayama, and Srimati Devi, and the ocean of Dharma protectors, may you spontaneously fulfill our wish, the swift blossoming of the reincarnation's precious moon-like face. Thank you. Good night.
No, cancel. Thank you.